Hey, how you doing today? That's great. It's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. Today I'm going to be doing a tier list on Pink Floyd, the legendary prog rock band from the 1960s all the way up into the 2010s, although they only had one album in 2010. Um, but Pink Floyd is not only one of the most iconic prog rock bands of all time, they are one of the most iconic bands of all time, I would say. I'd say they're probably in the top 10, if not, or top 20, if not top 10 most popular bands of all time. And that's really only for about a fourth of their discography, which is a shame. But, like, just, they have released so many quality albums over the years that it's really hard not to call them one of the best bands of all time, even if you're not a fan of their sound. I mean, they really are one of the most influential rock acts of all time. And they're one of my favorite bands of all time as well. I'd probably say they're top five at the very least. And I thought it'd be fun to do a tier list of them today. They have a wide discography of 15 studio albums, ranging all the way from 1967 to 2014. So this is going to be a long one. So strap in. We're going to start right off, with their 1967 debut, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. So in order to really talk about Pink Floyd, we need to talk about their background. So back when Pink Floyd started, it was Sid Barrett, who was the front man, Roger Waters, Richard Wright, and Nick Mason. That was the band. Barrett was on guitar, Waters was on bass, and Mason was on drums, and Richard Wright was on keys. So that was who made up the band. And with Sid Barrett being the leader of the group, and spoilers, that only lasted this one album, this record sounds way different from everything else the band would go on to release. Unlike a lot of the prog rockisms that the other albums would have go on to have, this one is more whimsical and like it's more centered on like fairy tales and whimsical stories rather than a lot of the the political or conceptual themes on a lot of the other albums. And I think that that's a good thing because I think that makes it very creative. However, I'm not a huge Sid Barrett fan. I do think he's a very creative mind, but a lot of the songs on this first album just aren't my favorite. I'm not a big fan of his singing style, and I know that's just me, but like, I just think the production is just kind of weird, just to be weird. I think that the opener, Astronomy Domini, is awesome, but I'm really not I'm really not a big fan of much of the rest of this. Well, there's a couple of highlights. Lucifer Sam is really good. The nine, almost 10 minute track Interstellar Overdrive is great. You have Bike, which is weird as hell, but I do quite enjoy it. But then you have like the Gnome and the Scarecrow and Power Talk H, which are just I'm not too big of a fan of any of those. I do like Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk. I do like that track quite a bit. But yeah, it's a really a mixed bag of an album. It has some really interesting ideas and some classic early Floyd tracks, but it's just not personally for me. And I don't know. It is still good though. I'm not going to deny its impact, and without it, we wouldn't have Pink Floyd. So I think just for all that, I think I'm going to go ahead and probably drop it in a B tier, which could be controversial. I know a lot of people really like this album, but for me personally, I would have to consider it maybe a B. Definitely not a C, but we'll give it a B. And then we move on to 1960. Their next. Did my headset just die? My headset just died. That's great. My headset just died. That's great. All right. Sorry about that. My headset died. No clue what the hell happened there. But yeah, moving on, we have A Saucerful of Secrets, which is their 1968 album, their sophomore album. And I am not too fond of it. I'm not too big on this album. Um, it's pretty short. It's not even 40 minutes long. It's only 7 tracks. There are some longer tracks on here. The opener, "Let There Be More Light," is a really cool instrumental that I like a lot, and I like "Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun." Corporal Clegg is a guilty pleasure. I know that it's not necessarily a good song, but I like it just because of how stupid it is. A Saucer Full of Secrets, the title track, it's 12 minutes long. I don't think it really needs to be that long at all. I really don't find it to be that interesting. Nothing much really happens. Seesaw is kind of boring. And then you have Jug Band Blues, which is the final track and is the only one on here sung by Sid Barrett. And it's actually probably one of my favorite Barrett tracks out of all of them. It is really interesting because the band had to kick him out because he was getting addicted to drugs. He wouldn't be able to perform on stage or anything like that. And they had to just kind of give him the boot and be like, "We're sorry, bud, but you got to go." And them doing this would go on to inspire the themes of a lot of their upcoming albums. And it even shows in some of the lyrics. But this is the only Pink Floyd album that has all 5 members on it, like all 5 members in their entire history, because this is where they introduced David Gilmour, who was a legendary guitar player. And while I don't want to be that guy, I do think them removing Sid Barrett was for the better, because without Barrett's departure, we wouldn't have Gilmour's amazing guitar work, and the band would not be the same without him. So yeah, I mean, some good tracks for sure, but also a lot of stinkers. I would say I'm only a big fan of probably 4 of the 7 tracks, and the other 3 are just kind of whatever. I'm gonna put it in a C tier. Not too big on it. It's okay. Not when I revisit too often. And something that sucks is with the early Pink Floyd albums, we kind of see that being a theme because they really didn't know what to do in this era without Sid Barrett. It would take them a couple albums to get to a standing point where they knew what to do next. So their third album, More, which is actually the soundtrack for a film that has never been seen by anybody in the world, More is not great. It's it's 13 tracks long. It's about 45 minutes. Most of them are instrumentals for the movie, and they aren't very interesting. There are some really good songs on here. There's the Nile song, which is a like a hard rocker from the band, one of their early heavy hitters, I would say. I love that track a lot. And then there's the fan favorite Cymbeline, which I do like a lot. Main theme is pretty good. And then there's some other ones like I like Quicksilver and Cirrus Minor is okay. But a lot of this is just noise for the movie. A lot of this is just a kind of a mediocre soundtrack. Um, I don't really like the cover that much. It's just kind of a still image from the movie that they took, and it's just not very interesting at all. I don't like the name, and it's just not an album that I really enjoy too much. But I will admit that there are high points, and just for the high points, I would give this a C tier. Definitely some standout moments, but a large majority of it is just noise, and I'm not too keen on it. Next up, we have their fourth studio album. This is one of 2 of their double albums, and this is Umaguma or Umaguma. There's a couple different ways people pronounce it, but yeah. To start, I'm going to start with the positives. I really like the cover. The cover is really, really cool. I like how it is that repeating image that just kind of seems endless. That is really cool. It's a really neat idea. And I like how in each image it has different members of the band up front and they're all in different positions. That's really neat. Also, I like that the band were trying to do something different with this album, with each member getting their own little section to do all by themselves, and I think that's a neat idea. Also, the so this album is 2 discs. First disc is a bunch of live cuts of fan favorites, and the second disc is the actual main album. And that's really where my positives end. Besides for one, but we'll get to that in a sec. This album is a mess. I do not know what the hell this album is meant to be. This album is an hour and a half long. Most of it is just a bunch of bullshit that is not interesting, is not necessary, is just a waste of time. There are so many filler tracks that just don't go anywhere, don't need to be on here. The live cuts are okay. But the only one I would say is a standout is "Careful with That Axe, Eugene." I think that track is amazing. I do really love it. The other live cuts are okay, but that is the standout of the live disc. And for the main disc, I don't have any positives like at all. Really, I don't like any of these. Um, I mean, Grantchester Meadows is kind of cool. And then Sisyphus has some cool parts, and that's like it. I just a lot of this is just a bunch of crap. Um, and like I said, the idea for them all doing their own sections on their own is cool, but it did not work out well at all. I just don't ever find myself revisiting this album. I think it is a waste of time, and for that, I will have to give it a D tier. It's like I said, it's probably their if not their second weakest or their weakest album, and it's the one I revisit the least. However, after those low points, we now get into some of the better albums for a little bit. Starting with Adam Heartmother, which I think is quite underrated. I think this album is really damn good. The It's really interesting. The first side is just one big instrumental piece, which is really interesting. It it features a lot of horns and brass work, which the band really don't do on any of their other albums. It's really on just this one, and it's really cool to hear them tackle that. And I think they pull it off pretty well. Also, another thing is Roger Waters and Nick Mason had to do the bass and the drums for this whole song in one take. So the credit to them for sticking to it and actually following through with that. That is really awesome. I would recommend it. It's a really good instrumental piece if you're into those. And then side two is very similar to Amagama, where they took each member of the band did their own song individually, and then they put them all together on the album. I would say that this has a better grouping of songs than Omagama. The second track, "If," is Roger Waters' cut, which is really good. I've always really liked that track. It's very pretty. "Summer of '68" is Richard Wright's track, and it's also really good. "Fat Old Son" is David Gilmour's track, and I think his singing on it is really good. It's a really melancholy, beautiful piece. And then Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, which is Nick Mason's piece, is the only one that I'm not a fan of. It's really just a bunch of noise. It's like a musique concrète piece about one of the band's roadies eating breakfast. And it's 13 minutes long, and it's just not necessary at all. I think the album would be better if they just took this and replaced it with something else. But it's an interesting concept, and I don't think it drags the album down too bad. Usually I listen to the whole album from Adam Hartman of the Fat Old Son, and then I just don't play that track. So it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, I really like Adam Hartmother. I think it is probably their best album so far, personally. I still think it's probably a B tier because a big portion of the album I don't like, which is the last track being 13 minutes, taking up a big portion of it. So I would still give it probably a B tier, but it is a step up, I would say, and I think it is my favorite album of theirs so far. And I think it is quite underrated. Don't think it gets the credit it really deserves. Alrighty, well, next up we have Metal, and this is the turning point, I would say. This is the point where they just went and became the Pink Floyd that everyone knows, I would say. At this point right here. Why does this keep doing this? This is really fucking annoying. Sorry, microphone died again. But anyways, like I was saying, this is where the band became the band we all know. We start with the opener One of These Days, which is a 6-minute rocker instrumental, which I love. The bass line on this track is so badass, and it has an amazing build up. There's A Pillow of Winds, which is beautiful. Fearless, which is a banger. Saint Tropez, which is probably my second least favorite on the album. Still good, though. Still a very good track, just not as high quality, in my opinion, as the others. We have Seamus, which is the fifth track, which sucks. It is the only track on here that I do not like at all, and that is because it's really just a bunch of dog noises for 2 minutes, really unnecessary, did not need to be there at all. Don't know why it was included. And then we have the closer Echoes, which takes up the entirety of side two. And this is probably the best or the second best Pink Floyd song ever made. It encapsulates everything good about the band all into one giant opus. The Every single part is just beautiful. You have the opening with those I don't know what to call them, those chimes that slowly leads into the piano, which then leads into David Gilmour singing the very first verse, which has that big build up, that the if you've heard the song, you know what I'm talking about. Which then leads into that giant instrumental piece, which leads into that eerie section back into the instrumental piece, and then you have Gilmour and Wright's vocals coming back in at the end. It is an absolute masterpiece. It is in probably the top 50 best songs ever made, if not like the top 30 best songs ever made. It is gorgeous. It is just so has so many ideas, and it is executed perfectly. And this album would probably be a B tier without Echoes, but Echoes is a 10 out of 10 song mixed in with a bunch of like sevens and eights, and then you have one in there that's a two. So if it wasn't for that one track, I think it might be able to be an S tier. I would still give it an A tier. Still an incredible album. Has one of their best openers and closers. And it's just amazing. This is, like I said, this is where the band became the band everyone knows and loves. And I think it is incredible. I think it is well worth a listen. I would just skip Seamus. But again, it doesn't hurt the album too bad. It's only a little 2-minute interlude track, so it doesn't hurt too much. All right, and then we get into their seventh album, Obscured by Clouds, which is another movie soundtrack, and this is the one right before the big cluster of the albums, the ones that I'm going to have a ton to say about. This one is okay. I actually like it. I like Obscured by Clouds, the opener. I like Burning Bridges. The Gold It's in the is a pretty good track. What's the Deal is I think David Gilmour's first attempt at songwriting, and I think it's pretty good. Mudmen is a cool instrumental. Childhood End and Free 4 are really good. And then I'm not a huge fan of Absolutely Curtains, the closer. I think it's okay. I just think that it's kind of a mediocre way to end it. But for a soundtrack album, it is pretty decent. I would say it is a big step up from More. That's for sure. More, I think, sucks pretty hard. But Obscured by Clouds has some pretty good high points on it, and I like that there's a lot more of the actual band singing on it. The movie for this also is pretty decent, La Valet. I've only watched it, I think, twice, but it's pretty decent, and I like the album. It's not one I come to. It's not one I come back to too much, but I would probably give it a B tier. It's a pretty solid album. I mean, I wish I could make an album that good, or make an album at all. Hell, but I cannot. But anyways, pretty decent. Definitely not where I would start with the band, but after you've gotten a couple albums under your belt, I think it's worth a listen. Now we get the big one. This is the one. This is up there with Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, Sgt. Pepper's from the Beatles, Thriller from Michael Jackson. Just it's up there with the albums that everyone knows, the albums that everyone loves, the albums that are the most iconic, the most influential. This is one of them. This right here. I would say that this is probably in the top 10 most well-known albums of all time. And for good reason. It's incredible. It is a great album. Not 10 out of 10 though, which might be surprising to some people, but I still like it a lot. Um, I still quite enjoy it a ton. It's still like a 9 out of 10. It's like a 9.5 out of 10. It's almost perfect. But there's a couple things that are just holding it down for me. But we'll get into. Not to take this album's credit away, because this still is a must listen album, and it is one of the most essential albums of all time for many many reasons. But let's go track by track. We have "Speak to Me," the opener, which isn't really a song. It's just kind of like a um a way to kick off the themes of the album, because it has like the sounds from Money being played, and it has a little bit of On the Run in there, and it has clocks in it, I think, a little bit, and a heartbeat, which comes in at Eclipse. Has all the themes kind of mixed in there at the beginning, just kind of a way to get you into the mood and get you started with the album. It's a pretty cool way to start. Next is "Breathe," which is a awesome track. I love Gilmore. I love his singing on that. It's really really awesome. I love how melancholic it is. You've got "On the Run," which is the first instrumental track, which is quite underrated, I would say. A lot of people think it is unnecessary, but I think it's really nice, and I think it's a great middle ground for "Breathe" and "Time," which, oh my God, "Time," one of the best Pink Floyd songs. Oh my God, it's so good. Gilmore's guitar solo is freaking great. I love the build up in the beginning and the first 2.5 minutes. It's so good. Go listen to it now if you haven't heard it. Great Gig in the Sky, next track. Has some amazing singing from, I always forget her damn name. Um, yeah, it's not coming to me right now, but I'm not gonna look it up. But the lady who is singing on this has a beautiful voice, and she is a great feature on it. And I just love her. I love how she complements the instrumentation a lot. Very, very beautiful. Next up is "Money," kicks off side two. Oh my God, another fantastic track. "Money" is like the most iconic song that's in 7/4 time. It's amazing. Roger Waters' vocals and lyrics are awesome. The sax solo in the middle is awesome. Everything about it is great. It's probably one of their most iconic songs. Go listen to it again. "Us and Them," absolutely beautiful. Again, love the build up on it. I love the chorus to death when they all kind of burst in there screaming the lyrics. It's so impactful, so awesome. I really cannot praise that track enough. And then we have "Any Color You Like," which is the second instrumental piece. It's a really cool way to transition from "Us and Them" to "Brain Damage," and also the way "Us and Them" transitions into "Any Color You Like" has one of the best like flows between tracks of all time. It's amazing. "Brain Damage," classic. It's a great excuse me. It's a great way to kind of end the album right before the closer, and it kind of features a lot of the themes of the album, of being like of capitalism and death and madness and time, like all the stuff that makes people angry, kind of shows up on here. Also, it has one of the best. Um, it incorporates the title track in its lyrics in one of the best ways I've ever seen. And then there's Eclipse, which is a phenomenal closer. It's just a short little way to end it, but it's awesome. It's amazing. It's fantastic. It's Dark Side of the Moon. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows it's great. Everyone loves it. It's how could it not be a damn S tier? I'm sorry. A lot of people nowadays say, "Oh, it's overrated." Blah blah blah. Okay, that's fine if you think that, but I still think it's phenomenal. But let's get into my only negatives. I think that the heartbeat at the beginning and end are cheesy as hell. Did not think they need to be there. Let's see. I wish that there was more to speak to me. I do think it's a good way to open, but I just wish there was a little more to it. Um, let's see. What else is there? There's like barely anything to criticize. Also, I just don't have as much like nostalgia or anything for this album as a lot of other people do, which is just another reason why I wouldn't consider it a 10 myself. But it's like a 9.5. Like it's basically perfect. There's just a couple tiny things holding it back. But I mean, come on, man. It's Dark Side of the Moon. Everyone knows it. Everyone loves it. And if you don't love it, what the hell's wrong with you? But yeah, it's definitely a classic to be sure, and it definitely belongs in the S tier and nowhere else whatsoever. And we're going to see a bit of a trend with the S tier here coming up, but I don't want to spoil too much. Next up, here, my fucking microphone went out again. Oh my god, this is so fucking annoying. I don't know why it keeps doing this. All right, back again. I don't know what is wrong with this damn microphone. Next up is "Wish You Were Here" from 1975, and to me personally, this album is a 10. Is a 10 out of 10. To me, it is their only piece of work that reaches the status of a perfect 10 out of 10 rating. And I'm going to get into that. So, this album is in dedication to Syd Barrett, who, of course, was their original frontman. And the way that they incorporate that into the instrumentation, the way they incorporate it into the lyrics, the way they incorporate it into the way that they sing about and stuff, and just the emotion is just so perfectly done in every single way. I really do not have any criticisms for this album. I would probably put it in my top 10 albums of all time. Yeah, it's definitely up there. I love it a lot. It's only 5 tracks, but don't get me wrong. Do not let the fact that it's only 5 tracks underestimate its masterwork. You have "Shine On You Crazy Diamond," which it starts with the first 5 parts of the song. The song in total is like 26 minutes long. But the first 5 parts that kick off the album is probably the greatest song the band has ever made. I would say, and it's probably my favorite track of all time from them too. You have the amazing little guitar lick from David Gilmour starting it out, followed by that iconic 4 chord progression of boom, 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 boom. That amazing, amazing guitar riff that is just, it goes throughout the whole album. You have the amazing instrumental piece leading up to Roger Waters' vocals kicking in near the end. You have the awesome chorus that is just so fun to sing along to. And of course, again, you have the amazing themes relating to Syd Barrett and his departure. It's phenomenal. It's incredible. It really is. And I would say it is the best track they've ever made. I tear up every time I hear it just for how beautiful the music is. Not because it's sad. It's not really sad, but it's so beautiful that it makes you kind of cry, and it does make you tear up a little bit knowing what the themes of it are. Next up is David Gilmour's "Time to Shine" with "Welcome to the Machine." The lyrics on this are a little cheesy for today's standards, being about, oh, everyone's part of the machine, man. Everyone's part of this machine. But I mean, some corny lyrics aside, I mean, the lyrics were very good for their time, and they still are good now. They're just not as original. But Gilmour's guitar work on here is amazing. The lyrics are amazing. The production is amazing. Um, the themes are fantastic yet again. It is another amazing track. Next up, we have a Cigar," which is like the one of the bigger songs on the album, one of the ones you'll hear on the radio. It has amazing key work from Richard Wright. It's one of his favorite, or one of my favorite keyboard pieces of his. It's just so gripping, and it actually features Roy Harper on vocals on this track. It's also a sequel to Money, which is pretty damn cool. It follows the themes of Money into this one, which is pretty neat to see how they kind of have a continuation. And this does have my favorite Pink Floyd lyric of all time, which is, of course, "Oh, by the way, which one's pink?" You know, that stupid ass line. But I love it. It's great. Definitely my favorite lyric they've ever done. It's just so iconic. It's so memorable. And then there's "Wish You Were Here," which is the most well-known song off the album, and probably their most well-known song, if not like a top three most well-known song of theirs. It's played everywhere. Everyone's probably heard it, and for good reason. I mean, it is beautiful, and it's another contribution to Sid Barrett. The lyrics are beautiful. The chorus is gorgeous. Just it's a perfect track. And then "Shine on You Diamond," or what? "Shine on You Crazy Diamond," parts 6 to 9. A phenomenal way to bookend the album. I love albums that have a bookend at the start and the finish. I love when the albums do that a whole lot, and I think this album probably does it the best ever, or one of the best ever. There's a couple others I could think of, but I think this does it one of the best. The second half of "Shine on You Crazy Diamond" is also phenomenal. You have the amazing sax solo. You have the reference to "See Emily Play," which is the band's first ever single, and another contribution to Sid Barrett at the very end. It's just a phenomenal way to close a phenomenal album. I really cannot sing this album's praises enough. Not even to mention that it has an amazing name and an amazing cover. I love the cover. It's so freaking cool. Definitely a top 20 cover of all time for me as well. And it's going right at the top of S tier, baby. It's S tier, and it is a 10 out of 10. And spoilers, it's their only album I consider to be a 10 out of 10, but that's not to take away the credit of their other work, because they've made some other masterpieces as well. Which, speaking of masterpieces, next up is "Animals" from 1977. Yeah, this is their second best album. I know that they're in. This is like their defining period is from metal, not including "Obscured by Clouds," up into the album after this. This is their sicko period, I guess you could say, where they just released amazing work after amazing work, and this is another one. The just everything about this is phenomenal. I love the cover. I love the themes. This probably has my favorite themes out of any Pink Floyd album, relating to capitalism, and it's also in reference to George Orwell's Animal Farm, which is really cool. Um, but yeah, the this album also bookends each other with "Pigs on the Wing" Part 1 and 2, which come at the start and the end. They're really tender, beautiful tracks. They're only about a minute and a half long each, but they're a great way to start and end the album. But in actuality, this record is three main songs: "Dogs," "Pigs," three different ones in quotations, and "Sheep." All these songs are 10 out of 10. No questions asked. "Dogs" is 17 minutes, "Pigs" is 11, and "Sheep" is 10 minutes, all of which are well worth their length. They'll have amazing lyrical themes, amazing instrumentation, phenomenal production, amazing vocals from David Gilmour and Roger Waters, respectively. Everything about these three tracks and about the whole album in general is perfect, I would say. I really want to give it a 10, and to me personally, it probably is, but I don't want to give a band two 10 out of 10 albums, because I think that's just kind of disrespectful, because there are so many other artists out there that deserve a 10, and it just doesn't make much sense giving them two 10 out of 10 albums. But man, this album is just so freaking amazing. It's just so hard not to give it one. Everything about it is just so well done. The guitar riff, or like the way the guitars come in at the end of "Sheep," is so awesome. You've got "Pigs," where he's got the iconic "Ha ha, Sharon, you are." That just such freaking interesting vocals. Just everything about it is so good. I love it to death. I'm gonna put it right up there right behind Wish You Were Here. It's damn close. It's almost there. I just think Wish You Were Here means more to both me and the band. But don't get me wrong, Animals is still a must listen, and it's like a 9.8 out of 10. Like it's so close to being a 10. It is perfect, basically. But yeah, that is their all of that's their main like fantastic albums. But the run isn't over yet because next up we have their second two disc album, their second double side, or not second, their second double album, The Wall, which is not only one of the most well known concept albums of all time, it is also one of the most well known double albums of all time. And this features some of the band's best songs and some of their most well known songs. It is probably one of the most well known concept albums of all time as well, if not the most well known. A lot of people probably know about it. The Wall follows the story of a guitarist named Pink who isolates himself from society. He puts this metaphorical wall around him to kind of keep everyone away from him. And then eventually he gets drunk and does drugs in an apartment room. The people who want him to go out on stage come in, and to try to counteract the drugs, they give him more drugs. While he's in his delusional state, he kind of becomes like a fascist dictator, um, trying to oversee and rule the world. And then, after feeling guilt, he puts himself on figurative trial and then tears down the metaphorical wall and releasing his mindset into the wild. It's a really interesting idea for an album. It's really, really interesting. And one second, my microphone disconnected again. All right, hopefully that's the last time this stupid microphone does this. All right, anyway, where do we start? I guess we could start with the opening, you dumbass. In the Flesh, the opening, great. I love. It's one of my favorite Pink Floyd guitar riffs. The boom, 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 boom. Yeah, it's phenomenal. I love it. I love it to death. It's a great way to start the album. However, starting that or following that, we have the Thin Ice, which isn't one of my favorites. Another Brick in the Wall Part One, which is just okay. The Happiest Days of Our Lives is pretty good. Then for track 5, we have Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, which is probably one of their, probably again in their top 3 most well-known one of their most well-known tracks. It's played on the radio all the time. I'm sick of it. I'm quite sick of it. I usually skip it just because of how many times I've heard it, but it is a good song. Mother is a beautiful guitar ballad from Roger. I do like it a lot. Goodbye Blue Sky is another slower track, but I like it a lot. Young Lust has Gilmore singing, and I think it's pretty underrated. Let's see here. What else do we have? We have One of My Turns is pretty good. Um, Don't Leave Me Now is good. Goodbye Cruel World is an okay way to end side 1, leading into side 2, which starts with Hey You, which is phenomenal. Is There Anybody Out There is great. Nobody Home is great. Comfortably Numb. God, that has one of the best guitar solos of all time on it. It's so beautiful, and I love Gilmore and Waters singing together. It's so pretty. And then you have In the Flesh with No Question Mark. That one's pretty good. Run Like Hell has been stuck in my head for days. Waiting for the Worms is good. And then you have The Trial, the second to last track, which is basically just like a play, or like, what's a better way to put it? It's not like any of their other songs. It features a lot of horns, and it's basically just Roger Waters yelling at multiple different versions of himself to represent Pink and his mindset. Really, really interesting. One of my personal favorite Pink Floyd deep cuts, I would say. It's really it's a great way to end the album. Followed by Outside the Wall, which is just kind of just a little instrumental to end things off. The album is an hour and a half long, which I do think it is a little lengthy. I don't listen to the whole thing front to back too often, but when I do end up being surprised at the quality. There are port. There are parts where it drags. There are parts that I'm not a huge fan of, but it is their highest selling album for a reason. Or is it their highest selling? It's either their highest selling or their second highest selling album. For a good reason, I would put it at an A tier. It's at the bottom of A tier just because I think there is quite a bit of filler on it. I could probably cut out at least 5 tracks from it and still be satisfied with the experience. But hey, it's The Wall. It's great. Truly one of the best concept albums of all time, and definitely one of the best double albums ever made. Definitely a big step up from their other double album, which is down here in the D tier. Now we get into kind of another low point for the band. Not to say that these albums are bad, but I'm going to kind of speed run a couple of these because I really don't have that much to say about them. They are kind of generic. Starting off with the Final Cut here, 1983 album. This is basically just a Roger Waters solo album. It kind of just features a lot of ideas that he himself was working on after The Wall. Also, I forgot to mention, but during the making of The Wall, Richard Wright left the band, which is a shame because I think the band is truly incomplete without him. And this album is basically all Roger Waters, which features the other members of Pink Floyd. That's really it. This feels the least like a Pink Floyd album since their debut, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. It just, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of a lot of the tracks. The Post-War Dream, the opening is decent. When the Tigers Broke Free is great. Let's see. The Gunner's Dream is good. I really like the Fletcher Memorial Home. The Final Cut is great. Not Now John, which is the only song that David Gilmour sings, is pretty good. But besides that, like there's quite a few tracks on here I do not care for. Your Possible Pasts, one of the few. The Hero's Return. What is it? Get Your Filthy Hands Off My Desert. Those tracks all suck. They're not good at all. Southampton Dock. I mean, just I don't know, just a bunch of very mediocre Pink Floyd songs. And I wish that it actually featured some of the other members because it's basically just Roger Waters. And I like Roger Waters a lot. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think the man has a big ego problem, but like he's still a great singer and a great lyricist and a great bassist. But Pink Floyd needs to have all of its members on it. It can't just be Roger Waters' time to shine. And I mean, for that, like it's gonna go in C tier. We'll put it right above More. That sounds fine because there are some decent songs on it and some good songs. But again, like just I don't like listening to something that is saying something that it's not. And that is a big reason why I'm not a fan of the later discography of the band, which we're going to start with now, with A Momentary Lapse of Reason. This is where Roger Waters left the band, and from this point it was only Nick Mason and David Gilmour, with Richard Wright returning, but he was like a side contributor. He wasn't a main member anymore, so it was really only 2 main members, and it shows. Also, not to mention, this album is like the most 80s sounding album out of any of their work. It's really dated. It's probably their most dated album by far. And there are some pretty decent songs, but I don't know. Just it's not for me too much. Damn dog is barking. Learning to Fly is very great. One Slip is great. I really love On the Turning Away. Yet Another Movie is good. But besides for that, I mean, we've got New Machine Parts 1 and 2. Not a big fan of. They don't really need to be there. They're kind of useless. And then we've got The Dogs of War, which is kind of whatever. Signs of Life is okay. And then Sorrow is a pretty decent outro. But just all that aside, again, I like when all the members are here and it doesn't just feel like a David Gilmour solo album this time. I'll go ahead and put it above the Final Cut because I do think the highs are higher and there's a couple more of them. But it's just another C tier for me. Just not too keen on it. But then As one last high point, we have the division bell, which I actually think is very underrated. I like the division bell a lot, actually. I think it's where the Gilmore Floyd found its footing. Richard Wright is much more prominent on this one, which makes me like it more because it feels more like a mainline Pink Floyd album. It, of course, still doesn't have Roger Waters, which is a damn shame. But there are high points here. We have Cluster One, "What Do You Want from Me," Marooned, which is a great instrumental track. You've got "Coming Back to Life." The closer, "High Hopes" is amazing. Just it's pretty good songs front to back. I do think it is still kind of generic at a lot of points, but I do think that this is where the Gilmore era Floyd found its footing. I would put it at a B tier. I'd say we'll put it right there. I'd say it's about on par with Piper at the Gates of Dawn. I do like it quite a bit. I actually returned to it a decent amount considering what it is. I even own a poster of it. It's actually the only Pink Floyd poster I have. It was gifted to me by an old teacher, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, not too bad. And then to end things off, we have The Endless River, which is the um, final Pink Floyd album released in 2014. It's not really a real Pink Floyd album. Um, the only the only track on here that features any singing is the last track, "Louder Than Words," which has David Gilmour singing it. All the other ones are fully instrumental. And this thing drags. This thing drags a lot. Not a big fan of it at all. I basically never listen to it. It's probably my second least listened to Pink Floyd album. And I don't know. There's just no high points. It is nice that they came back in memory of Richard Wright, who sadly passed away, I believe, in 2007. They came back, or maybe it was 2009, but they took all the extras from the Division Bell leftover recordings and they made this album, which is very nice, but it's just not worth it. It really is not. I'm not a fan of this at all. Gonna put it at a D tier down there with Ummagumma. I think it's a little bit better. There's some better ideas. Some high points would be "It's What We Do," "Louder Than Words." Um, on Noodle Street's okay. I don't know, man. Skins. I don't know. I'm really struggling to think of some songs, but yeah, it's not one I ever revisit. But yeah, there is it. That is it. That is my entire Pink Floyd discography ranking. This was really fun getting to talk about one of my favorite bands of all time, go through their history. Um, as you can see, their discography is fantastic. They have had tons of great highs and tons of terrible lows, but that's just the sign of a well-made band. They are one of the de facto and most influential bands of the 60s up until the 90s, one of the best prog rock bands of all time, and one of my favorite bands of all time personally. And yeah, I want to just thank you all so much for watching. I know this was another longer video, but I always love taking more time to go into a band's discography, especially at a lengthy band like this discography. And I appreciate you all taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed, please leave a like. Of course, you don't need to, but it would mean a lot. Please leave a comment. I love answering my comments. It's always one of the best highlights of my day. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And thank you so much for watching.